Hello and good morning. This is Wednesday and this is Breakfast with Bev, except this morning it's going to be breakfast with Dan and Mike Morgan. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
So this morning we're going to talk about the process that Mike went through on selling his home. And he ultimately bought a house with us too, which we're very thankful for. And that'll be another Breakfast with Dan and Mike edition sometime. But this morning we're going to talk about the selling process and what Mike went through during that time. So now I know in your case you were wanting to downsize. So once we met you and talked to you, you were going to downsize. And so was there anything when you decided to sell? Was there anything that you were nervous about going into the selling process, or what were some of your biggest concerns when you first started the process to sell your home?
When we first started, it was we just had a kind of a timetable for ourselves that we really wanted to make sure that happened, and so that was kind of the overwhelming big thing for us.
Yeah, was doing it in a certain time.
Yeah.
And so then once we decided and we talked to you about it, how many agents did you ultimately talk to, or that went through this process with you?
You all were the third.
Third.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And when we talked to you, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think you had been on the market for on and off for 2 years?
Actually, a little bit longer, about
A little bit longer than 2.5
years.
years.
Yeah.
Okay. So, ultimately, after speaking to Bev and I, ultimately, what made you choose to list your house with us and our team?
Just after we talked, I think the overall marketing plan that you guys had, and just your honest feedback with us about our home and what we could do to make it more marketable was very appealing.
Yeah, and I will say too, I'm going to interject here. Honestly, I've told you this before. You were probably one of the best clients we could ever have, because everything that our team suggested and everything that we wanted you to do, we knew when we walked into your house from day one what we needed to do to sell your house, right? And so the tough part sometimes is getting the seller to get along with that plan and get with it and let's get this thing moved. And you guys could not have been better on that. I've told you that before, but folks, I mean, they listened to us from day one, and then we ultimately got your house sold, I think, in right about 45 days.
That's correct.
That we did. So, and again, that's so much credit for you guys doing everything that we asked. So,
well, and you guys are the experts, and that's what we were looking for, and you obviously came through for us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I appreciate that. So let's talk about the process of selling your house. Okay, so there was a few stressful moments.
Oh yeah,
a couple stressful moments. So, did having a team like this, we have a 5-person team. Not everybody sees that on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
ultimately, we got 5 people in here, and we each have our own role, but we also overlap one another to help through these situations and issues. And so once we got you under contract and we went through the inspections, that's when the process really became kind of interesting. I call it interesting. You probably got a different word for it. But so walk me through how that was from a selling process and what it was like going through it with our team and what we faced.
It was from our standpoint, there were stressful points just through the process, and again, I think that's probably with every selling process. There are things that come up that are unexpected, and so you guys handled it just wonderfully. I mean, if there was a question that we had in particular, and again, like you mentioned, someone on your team had that expertise to give us an answer just so quickly. It was nice not to have to sit back and not hear and kind of wonder and let your mind go in different directions.
Yeah. Well, when we got hit from a few different directions, like hey, we got to bring this person in to do this, we got to bring that person in to do that. So there's a lot of coordinating there. Yeah. And again, you guys, you handled that with such grace and smiled and said, let's plow forward and let's get to the goal line, and we ultimately did. So Through the negotiation, I'm going to back up just a little
Yeah.
bit. So once we got that initial offer, not even before we went into the inspection period and went under contract, but when we got that initial offer, can you talk about the advantages of having a team? Get to that point where we get under contract and go from the initial offer to where we agree on it. So can you kind of expound on that a little bit as
Yeah.
well?
So once we got the offer, you and Bev came and talked to us, which was in person. It wasn't a conversation over the phone or via text message or email or anything like that.
Right.
But
And I think it was a Friday.
it was a Friday night
At about 10 p.m.
and so which was great.
Awesome.
That's when it was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But we sat down and we probably talked for about an hour or so, and talked through the options about what we could do with our counteroffer, if there was anything that we could negotiate, and I think we put in one counter, and the buyers were generously on the same page as us,
Yeah,
and so
responsive to that.
the response was favorable.
Yeah, and there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. There's a lot of moving parts when you get that offer. It's like okay, what do we do with this offer? Strategically, how do we do the counter?
Mhm.
Because again, we're on timelines. This thing had been on the market over 2
Yeah.
years, and so we had to really put a lot of thought into this to make sure that you strike when the iron's hot and,
Yeah.
and get this thing done. And once again, not kidding here, once again, you guys just were champions through this and talked it out with us, understood everything on the counters and everything, and so. And then again, there we got your house sold.
Yeah. And again, and sometimes it's not always something that you really want to hear. It may not be always in your favor, but ultimately it is, because our goal was to get our home sold on kind of our timeline,
Yeah.
and so that helped us.
Yeah.
to that.
Well, and I'm so glad you just said what you
Yeah.
said, which means in this process you don't always hear what you want to hear.
Mhm.
And it's like, how do we handle this adversity? How do we get through this hurdle? How do we get over this bump and get to the goal line? And we knew your time frame. So I'm glad you said what you just said,
Yeah.
because it's not always just this smooth, easy process.
Yeah.
It very rarely is, to be honest with you. We handled a little bit more than normal on yours, but we got it done.
Yeah.
So, in closing, would you hire us again?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And you did right after we sold your house. We actually closed on the house that you bought same day, like
That's correct.
1 hour
Mm-hmm.
or like 5 minutes actually.
It was pretty
after
close.
you closed on the house you sold.
Yeah.
So you obviously use this again. So do you have any advice to people out there that's thinking about selling their house? So they're on the fence. Do we sell? Who do we use? Do you have any advice? I know this is a little bit of a tough question for you,
Mhm.
but do you have any advice on that? Like how to go through the process, how to choose the agent or anything? Do you have any words on that?
Well, I think I think the biggest thing is trusting the agent and making sure that.
Did everybody hear that? Did everybody hear that? It's so true.
It is. I mean, you guys,
And not just our team.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think making sure you trust your agent and understanding that that they know the market the best. I mean, we loved our house, our previous house, and thought that anybody that walked in would see the same thing that we see, and that's not always the case. And so, trusting the team to market the house in a way that that's relevant for what people are looking for at the time, I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate the words. I appreciate your time coming in today, and you were a really good case for this video segment on the selling process and everything. So I appreciate you coming in today.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks.
all right. Well, thanks so much. That's Breakfast with Dan and Mike today, and we will see you next Wednesday.